r/offmychest. Throw away 19,282,828,272 says. I cut off my son when I found out I wasn't his father, but now I'm beginning to feel guilty. Throw away for obvious reasons. I 40 male and my wife 42 female have one son together. Frank 18 male. I met my wife through her younger brother, my friend from college. I got her pregnant and found out 5 months before my son was due. Her parents are extremely religious and threatened to cut her out of their lives if we did not get married. Our relationship has always been rocky, but we stayed together for the sake of Frank. As Frank got older, I started to notice his features, how none of them matched mine or my wife's. We both have short noses, whereas my son's was always particularly long. We are both dark-haired with darker skin, whereas my son is a very fair blonde with freckles and skin that is so pale it's almost translucent. I wasn't too worried about it and thought it'd always be that way. I knew enough from school to know genes and DNA are a funny thing and to not stress it. I thought that once he got older and grew into his features a bit more, then I might start seeing similarities. But once he reached puberty and the features did not change, I started to become suspicious. I brought it up with my wife before bed and she told me that there was no possible way for him to be anyone else's child, as the only person she ever had sex with was me. I now know how stupid I was, but I genuinely believed her at the time. Fast forward to a few years later, Frank brought home a girl and of course, I and my wife did the typical embarrassing family photo album. But as my wife turned through the pages of the book, I noticed a prominent man that kept popping up in the photos with my wife from her college days. He was the spitting image of Frank, and when I tried to get her to turn the pages back, she quickly shut the book and said she had to check on dinner. She clutched onto the book tightly for the rest of the night and refused to make eye contact with me. Of course, my suspicions got the better of me. And while she was asleep that night, I snuck downstairs and grabbed the book from the dresser. I scrolled through the pages and found him, and seeing him more up close was even more striking. His nose, his eyes, his hair, his mouth, his jaw. He was like Frank's doppelganger. When I confronted my wife about it in the morning, a screaming match ensued. Our neighbors ended up calling the cops, and I spent the next 2 days in a hotel in town. I asked my wife to meet me for coffee, where I gave her an ultimatum. She would either agree to take a paternity test or I would file for divorce. She broke down crying in the middle of the restaurant and confessed that the man in the photos was in fact Frank's biological father and that he wanted nothing to do with her or her baby. She knew her parents would make her get an abortion if she didn't marry his father, and the fact that after university my degree would help me find a good job gave her enough fuel to baby trap me with a child that wasn't even mine. Understandably, I was mortified and saddened that she would lie to me for all these years, but the worst revelation was that from the age of 14 onwards, Frank knew and kept up the secret with my wife. I called Frank and confronted him about keeping this a secret from me, and he told me that he simply didn't want to give up the life we had and the financial stability I gave him and his mom. He was planning on telling me after I paid his college tuition. I blocked his number and filed for divorce from my wife a few weeks later. I'm currently at my parents' house while trying to find somewhere temporary to stay. I've received many angry messages from my wife and my family telling me I'm a horrible person for cutting off Frank, even if he's not my own son. I don't think I'm in the wrong, but I don't have anyone on my side here, and I'm starting to question if cutting off Frank was maybe too far. What do I? Watching Big Brother 63 says, I'm on your side. Your wife lied to you at the very beginning and kept this lie up for almost 20 years and included her son in the deception. You have every right to feel like you've been had because you have. And if I'm being honest, when Frank said that he kept the lie going to keep getting my money and no mention of because I love you, even though you're not my real dad, I would have cut him off too. The first thing I thought of when I read that was Frank's mother telling him, listen honey, don't say anything, because we don't want to lose this nice house and life we have. I'd sell the house and move to El Salvador and get in on the Bitcoin craze or something as radical. I seriously would. Momak 2011 says, seriously, I was expecting to read that Frank was scared Op wouldn't love him and couldn't get the courage to tell Opus. Not, well, I probably wouldn't get your money if you knew, so I planned to tell you when I was done leeching. True Bamboo says, yeah, I'd have slightly disagreed with the decision if Frank was even a little emotionally invested or cared about Op, but he clearly doesn't. Like, yeah, the stress of that shouldn't have been put on a 14 years old, and it's completely understandable for him to want to keep a happy family, but he should told dad, and would have, if Frank actually cared for Op regardless of the fallout. Definition would have told Op to rethink if Frank actually loved him, but now they both should be cut out yesterday. Sindermansky says, likely Frank was manipulated by his mother to say that type of stuff. My mom led me to believe a ton of lies about my dad, and I really wasn't able to form my own opinions until I was a full-grown adult in my 20s. I realize now that my mom was wrong and my dad was right, but it took years of growing in for me to form my own form of thinking. An 18-year-old is just doing and saying what his mom is telling him. Frank will realize when he's older who his mom really is, but you should at least be there for him emotionally if not financially. Off my chest. Miamivibi says, why are rude people allowed to be rude and it's okay? Work. Kaokajana, shrewd, argumentative, and you must walk on eggshells around her, or else she'll trigger her. No one likes Jana. When she walks into the building, everyone says hi to everyone besides her. I'm a quite shy person, but I also don't like seeing anyone on the outskirts, so I make it point to say hello to her and even have conversation. Jana has always been nice to me except one day. I made a mistake, unintentionally at work. The mistake wasn't enough to inconvenience Jana, but enough for her to become livid at me. When I apologized, she scoffed at me and then accused me of escalating the situation because I called her out on scoffing at me. So I stopped speaking to her. Jina is retiring tomorrow and I had intentions of getting her something nice, but since she yelled at me, I decided not to. They had a cake for her and we all had to gather around for it. I'm on a weight loss journey, so I didn't take any cake. Jina asked me why I'm not having cake, and I told her my reasons. And then she called me a liar in front of everyone. I shot back and told her this is why no one likes you, and everyone was kinda shocked and said that's just Jina. Why? Why is someone allowed to be tyrant and no one is supposed to say anything? Good riddance. Jivemi Orking says, this is why nobody likes you, I'm dead. Additional Falcon 493 says, I have this mantra of choosing your battles, but still, kudos to you for standing your ground. Don't let anyone step over you like that. Tubalub says, I used to work with a much older colleague who had a favorite saying, offenses never intended, it's always taken. He used that as her excuse to say exactly what he wanted about anybody, and if they got upset, it was their fault for taking offense. Racist, misogynist, generally verbally aggressive and argumentative. There were complaints made about him, and ours basically said he's old, he's retiring soon, we'll just wait it out. He got a bye for his behavior, because over the years, everyone accommodated it and worked around it. It was easier to do that than tackle him, like his rudeness was just a bit of a personality quirk. It became automatic that he would react in certain ways or make the same comments and complaints, and no one saw it as something to be dealt with. Just crap management really, but I think a lot of workplaces have similar people. Off my chest. Yak Acceptable says, I feel guilty for putting my brother in juvie. I 22 female, flew in the other night to visit my family. I wanted to spend some good time friends, and especially my brother who I know is lonely and depressed. My first day back, my brother 14 male began harassing and disrespecting me, generally being annoying and talking shit, blocking my path, taking my things. I was trying to leave the house to go study, and for the entire hour of him harassing me, he kept saying, "You're not going anywhere without me, I won't let you leave." When I began heading out the garage door, he became aggressive with me, physically restraining me to keep me from leaving. While I resisted and told him to get off of me, he dragged me back into the house, proceeded to pin me down, and put his body weight on me, preventing me from breathing. We continued to wrestle for a good 10 to 15 minutes. He let me go a few times as I was yelling / begging for him to. When I tried to make an exit, he would pull me back and by my hair. At one point he let me go and got me water after spitting in my face 3 times. I tried to call the cops a couple of times, and each time he would throw my phone across the room and continue to attack me, preventing me from leaving. At one point I was really scared for what he might do to me, and I bit his arm. He responded by punching me in the jaw twice. He basically kept pinning me down out of fear that I would run away and call the cops. We were home alone and the Wi-Fi/phone service had been down all day, which he knew. I was able to run to the neighbor's house and call the police. They arrested him and has now spending time in juvie until Sunday. Has become aggressive with me before, but never to this extent. The other day he got in a fight at school, nothing major, just pushing and shoving. Last week he came up behind my mom and attempted to strangle her in a fit of rage. Besides this, he was always a good kid. He tries hard in school and doesn't do any drugs, has not a delinquent, he has a shy demeanor, etc. I told him if he were to put a hand on me, I wouldn't hesitate to call the police. During the fight he was recording me and acting as though I was attacking him, claiming that he needed to apprehend me as I was a danger. I'm 51 and 100 pounds and this kid is like 180 lbs. My parents immediately took his side and were mad at me for calling the cops, since now has in the juvenile system. I feel really bad thinking of how he has to spend the next few nights in a cold cell and be treated as a prisoner. I know he feels guilty and I feel guilty as well. I cold called 5150 and had him put in a psychiatric facility instead. When my mom went to visit him, he was crying and apologizing, claiming that he loves me. We'd get into fights when we're younger, and he was also the victim of violence from our older brother growing up. I was really close to him and saw him grow up. He was a sweet kid and has just become very isolated and hateful over the past few years. I just don't want to believe he's an evil person, and I feel bad for what he has to deal with in juvie, since half the time kids come out so much worse. I really don't know what the solution is, and my parents are equally confused on what to do with him. I've told them for a year now that he needs to start seeing a therapist as has become increasingly disrespectful and defiant. I don't know whether to blame him and believe that he deserves to be in juvie, or feel guilty if he comes out traumatized and more angry. Trekkie63 says, "Don't feel guilty. He put himself in juvie. He needs serious help." Yak Acceptable says, "Okay, you're right. I did the right thing for myself, and it's not my fault." Jetfree 777 says, "He is a violent menace. Only a matter of time before he does this, or worse, to someone not in the family. Since he strangled your mother, he is about 10x more likely to kill her. Look it up." Yak Acceptable says, "This is scary to admit, but you're absolutely right. My mom decided to respond to this by being gentler and supportive with him, rather than angry/defensive, but obviously that's not the solution." Hunter Love Esreding says, "He tried to strangle your mum. He is dangerous. Please get him psychiatric help ASAP." Edit, Op, I'm not sure you're understanding the severity of this situation. He needs to be inpatient. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.